The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Well, but I just want to make sure I have this straight. So you sent them a long, in effect, essay on what you thought, but they put
Yes,
their
sir.
own words in the question, and they weren't the same as the words you had sent in? They were the producer's words?
Absolutely. They had taken what I had wrote and what I had briefed on and talked about, and they actually wrote the question for me.
But not with your words. I mean, they put their own words into your question, even after they'd asked you to send questions in. But that seems dishonest.
It definitely did, and that's kind of why I didn't go last night. Originally, I had thought that it was going to be more of my own question and my own say, and then it turned out to be more of just a script. And she had actually said that over the phone that I needed to stick to the script.
That's remarkable.
That's the voice of Fox News' Tucker Carlson speaking with one of the survivors of the shooting in Parkland at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. That student's name was Colton Hobb. The claim that Colton is asserting there on this national media cable news platform that reaches millions upon millions upon millions of people every day, of which the highest ranked show is Tucker Carlson. What he's asserting is that CNN at the town hall last week, where thousands of people were in attendance, probably a stadium full, or at least an arena full of people, and millions of people watching across the nation. Colton Hobb went on Fox News with Tucker Carlson and said that CNN wrote his script and refused to allow him to ask his questions. Earlier in that interview with Tucker Carlson, he asserted that he wanted to be able to speak and give the idea, or at least support the idea, that teachers could carry guns if they wanted to voluntarily carry weapons, and that would be a good way to support this never happening again. And his contention was that they did not want that opinion. They, being CNN, did not want that opinion going across the airwaves. And because of that, he ultimately did not go because it was scripted. The subtext of this is simply that CNN is a left-wing media outlet that is trying to forward a narrative, an anti-gun narrative, and they're doing so at the expense of the Parkland shooters by forcing them to write or forcing them to give speeches that were written for them by CNN producers. That is exactly what has been asserted. That's not what was precisely said on Fox News, but he doesn't have to say that. Tucker Carlson never has to say that because the echo chamber will say it. Well, that was last week. As of last night, the father of the Florida shooting survivor, Colton Hobb, has admitted to the Associated Press that he, quote, unintentionally omitted some words. Says that he is the one that altered the email, and he altered it unintentionally in a fashion that would make it look as though CNN was trying to script the town hall on last week. So, but before I go any further, let me pause and say this. In a tragedy like this that is centered around guns, it's always going to be politicized, period. That means that in the sea of victims, which unfortunately we have that many victims, but in that sea of victims, you're going to have different beliefs, different political ideologies, and different agendas, quite frankly. And this is not the same. Agenda is not a pejorative here. Agenda is not a bad word. Agenda simply means that in the midst, in the aftermath of this tragedy, you want to get something done. Now, I say all this to say that this family who has been caught, the father and the son, particularly the father who's taken the blame for it, they've been caught doing this, trying to shift the conversation towards media bias, left-wing media, basically supporting right-wing conspiracy theorists' talking points. They're still victims, though. They're still victims of this tragedy. And I want to just put that on the record because this is a opportunity to really point out how the right wing really works and how malicious they really are and how far they're willing to go in order to defend guns. But I think also equally in order to attack the media despite this being a perfect example, the quintessential example, oh my goodness, this is ridiculous what this father has done. But they're still victims that suffered a significant tragedy. And I have to put that in context because really politicizing this would mean that you only care about the victims that have the same ideology as you. That's not the case for me. I feel bad for this kid, especially if this was his father's doing by himself. I feel bad for the kid because not only did he suffer a tragic loss of so many friends, he's now having to bear the brunt of something stupid done by his father. Now, that being said, giving all my caveats and disclaimers to the side, can you see how ridiculous this is? How far people on the right are willing to go in order to forward their narrative and their agenda? This is why I always say we're in an asymmetrical fight. They're not as smart as they like to think they are. It's not as though this email that they released to media outlets, it's not as though there wasn't a carbon copy in the possession of CNN. And that's what CNN put out last Friday. CNN put out the email as they sent it. And if you want to get into the minutia of it, it's not really that complicated. They sent a statement over to the father via email to Glenn Hobb. And it simply said this: "Hi, Glenn, that was really way too long. These are quick questions so that we can get to as many people as possible. This is what Colton and I discussed on the phone that he submitted. He needs to stick to this." And then she gave the statement that was addressed to Florida Democratic Senator Bill Nelson, discussing how this may have played out if the athletic director had a gun. Okay. The key phrase in here, this is what CNN replied with. The key phrase in this whole controversy is that he submitted. When the father sent this email to different publications, he altered it and took out the line that he submitted. And so it read like this: "This is what Colton and I discussed on the phone. He needs to stick to this." In other words, giving the impression that CNN was strong-arming this young boy and telling him that this is what he has to say, never mind what he wants. Okay, I mean, this is just one side of it. So it's all come out. The father said he didn't intend to, he didn't maliciously do it. He just accidentally deleted the one phrase that would explain the fact that the question that's being discussed, that the producer is telling him to read, is his question that he submitted. And then you have all of the outrage from people like, of course, Tucker Carlson.
But they put
Yes,
their
sir.
own words in the question, and they weren't the same as the words you had sent in. They were the producer's words?
Absolutely. They had taken what I had wrote and what I had briefed on and talked about, and they actually wrote the question for me.
But not with your words. I mean, they put their own words into your question, even after they'd asked you to send questions in. But that seems dishonest.
With his boyish-like persona of being naive and the confused look on his face, knowing that if he had dug into this like a real journalist and really questioned this before he put it on the air, that he would have found this out. And he could have easily found this out. This was not something that was confidential, classified, or that took more than a phone call to the producer. He had the producer by name, and then he would have easily found the emails. Ask the father for the email, compare the emails. Boom, it's done. But why do that when you can have a narrative that conveniently undermines the pushback against assault rifles, right? See, Republicans, conservatives, and gun advocates and gun crazy people, they are on their heels. These kids, Alex Wind, Emma Gonzalez, David Hogg and Cameron Kasky. These kids have fundamentally changed the entire dynamic of the national conversation with regards to guns. The NRA is on the defensive. And so if you can't win the conversation, if you can't win the debate, what do? You attack the person. And that's exactly what they intended to do. Proof or evidence or facts be damned. None of that matters. They have the opportunity to get another victim who is a victim just as much as anyone else. but a victim whose father has a political agenda, just like they try to say David Hogg is a crisis actor and his father is an FBI agent, and so they have an agenda. This is actually the case with Colton Hobb and his father, Glenn Hobb. They had an agenda, and Glenn Hobb at least admitted to being the one who altered the emails unintentionally, without malice, but in a very specific fashion that would create the impression that CNN was bullying this young boy who had an alternative view. Here's Tucker Carlson last night clearing this up.
We've got an update on that gun control rally that CNN held last week. After the event, a high school student called Colton Hobb claimed that CNN tried to give him a scripted question to ask on camera. Colton came on this show last week on Thursday to tell his story. CNN denied the account. Now, Colton and his parents sent us their email correspondence with CNN, which seemed to confirm Colton's claim that his question had been altered by a CNN producer. On Friday, we asked CNN to verify and comment on those emails, because that was our journalistic duty, so we did it. A short time before air, CNN provided us a different set of emails. We immediately asked the Hobbs about those. They said they were being slandered by CNN, and that's where it stood. Two sides telling contradictory stories. Without access to their email accounts, we could only guess which one was telling the truth, and guessing is not enough. Tonight we have more. We have an update. The Hobb family concedes that they did remove a line from one of their emails in a way that might make some think its meaning had changed. Colton's father says it was accidental. We don't know. We can't prove or disprove that. But for the sake of honesty and full disclosure, to which we are committed, we have to tell you there is no evidence as of right now that CNN tried to give Colton Hobb a scripted question. And we wanted you to know that.
So here's the problem with that. Tucker, you didn't even bother to ask the kid on air about that. You know, maybe you're trying to, or at least, you know what, don't ask the kid that. Okay, you're not supposed to ask the kid that, because that's a bad look. But ask his father to be on, and ask his father that. If you had this beforehand, you didn't even bother to say it on air. You knew this beforehand, and you didn't even bother to set it up for your audience so that they can decide. So you only offered one side of the argument. And now everyone is saying that this is some type of example of great journalistic integrity. But the problem is that he actually did know this beforehand and chose to run with a singular narrative that benefited his political ideology. You get no points for that, Tucker Carlson. None whatsoever.
They've got David Hogg, who if you even just say his name, you're banned off YouTube because he's a young child, a young baby. No, he's a survivor of the shooting attack who is admittedly an actor, but not acting as a crisis actor in a fake shooting. He's got talking points, just like the fake CNN halls. And if you say that, well, you've got to be banned.
So that, obviously, you know, that voice, that's the voice of Alex Jones, our village idiot who has found a way to make millions upon millions of dollars off of conspiracy theories. And he's speaking of David Hogg, who is one of the founders of Never Again, the March for Our Lives. And he is the one that the conspiracy theorists have been saying he is a crisis actor because he is a, part of the thespian club at school. And well, as much as I'd like to just laugh and celebrate the fact that Alex Jones now has 2 strikes on YouTube after the 3rd strike, your entire channel is taken down, I couldn't help but realize how saturated that one little clip, that short clip of Alex Jones, how saturated with propaganda it was, and how saturated it was with sophistry. Actually, Alex Jones is brilliant in a way, in a very nefarious way, because that one. Listen to the technique. Let's dissect this, and then we'll talk about the actual news headlines about it.
They've got David Hogg, who if you even just say his name, you're banned off YouTube because he's a young child, a young baby.
I mean, listen at that. That is a masterstroke of using rhetorical devices in order to get a political agenda across. First of all, he uses exaggeration. No one is getting banned for mentioning David Hogg's name, but he knows that he's getting banned for something far more nefarious than just mentioning David Hogg's name. He's going to get banned because YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter are changing how they are allowing certain type of material to exist on their platform. Now, you can argue whether that's a good thing or not, but clearly these conspiracy theories that are Sandy Hook truthers and now Parkland, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas truthers, it's one step too far. So the exaggeration is really clear. There's also some irony in there that he's using. He's trying to say one thing and get his audience to believe and act on the opposite of what he's saying. He's referring to David Hogg as a young child, as a baby, right? He's exaggerating it, but then he's using it in a sense of irony so that he can get the audience to reject the idea. He's not a baby. He's not a child. So you say one thing to get the opposite reaction out of your audience. The best example of this would be Mark Antony's eulogy for Caesar, where he said, "Here under the leave of Brutus and the rest, for Brutus is an honorable man. So are they all honorable men." Clearly, we all know that Mark Antony was using that, or at least Shakespeare was using that as a rhetorical device to get the exact opposite reaction out of the audience at a later point. But how do you break people away from someone so beloved and someone so cherished as Brutus was in that moment? Likewise, and granted, I don't know if Alex Jones is actually smart enough to be doing this on purpose, or if he is just a person who has the gift of being able to do this without even knowledge of what he's doing. That's besides the point. In that one little clip, you have both hyperbole. You have the use of hyperbole, you have the use of irony, and you even have the use of tautology, right? It's where he says that David Hogg is just a child, right? He's setting that up as a way of getting the opposite reaction out of the audience. And then he repeats it and he says, he's just a baby, right? It's a classical move that he uses here, the combination of tautology and irony in order to get the exact opposite reaction out of his audience. So with the end of this one little clip, what's happening in the minds of all the listeners is, he's not a child. He's not a baby. He's somebody that we should fight. Brilliantly done, Alex Jones. A masterpiece of propagandistic rhetoric.
They've got David Hogg, who if you even just say his name, you're banned off YouTube because he's a young child, a young baby. No, he's a survivor of the shooting attack who is admittedly an actor, but not acting as a crisis actor in a fake shooting. He's got talking points, just like the fake CNN halls. And if you say that, well, you've got to be banned.
Now, here's where Tucker Carlson's little interview is actually weaponized even further. Forget about the fact that Tucker Carlson had to take this back. Alex Jones has picked it up and he slides it in there, says just like CNN's, you heard him, he says just like CNN's fake town hall or fake halls. He slides it in there as a statement of fact, even though we who are not in the swamp of propaganda and conspiracy theories, those of us who aren't drinking the Alex Jones Kool-Aid or the Fox News' Kool-Aid, we know that it's a lie. But for those people who are locked in the echo chamber, it's a statement of fact. This is where Tucker Carlson and Fox News' work is so dangerous, because it's like just simply asserted as a fact. But he does something else here, right? He knows that he can't call David Hogg a crisis actor, so he doesn't have to be a crisis actor. All he has to do now is be an actor, because he's previously already undermined David Hogg's credibility by saying he's a crisis actor. So that seed is already there. It's like switching what you're watering or what you're feeding a plant. The plant has already been planted. The seed was planted. It has already grown. His audience already believes that this is fake, so he doesn't have to keep feeding them the same level of propaganda. He could take a step back, because that seed has already grown, and all he has to do is say, well, he's an actor. So what he's doing on television may not be crisis acting, but it's acting nonetheless. this is actually kind of fun, just breaking apart how brilliant, and again, he could just be a moron who has talk game. Honestly, that's all it is. You don't have to have studied any of this to be able to utilize it. Most of the people who study it probably never really utilize it as efficiently as Alex Jones is using it. But we should I absolutely understand what's being done. All of that in a 3-second clip. I guess it makes sense why he's so successful, because he's using some very seductive language that has the ability to say one thing and get the exact opposite reaction out of his audience. That's just one example of a rhetorical device that he's using. A little bit more.
They just say it's fake that you're an actor. No, he's an admitted actor. Just because you're an actor doesn't mean there wasn't a school shooting. So they play these semantical games preying on their audience who they have total psychopathic disdain for, Stelter and people. I mean, it's like Gruber admitting, thank God you're so dumb. All of them just praying you're not conscious, praying you're not paying attention.
Oh, my goodness. I can honestly talk about this part all day. This is a classic case of psychological projection. He is right here. He is admitting to his audience what he does to his audience every single day. But he's saying that the other person, the other party involved, they're the ones who's actually doing it. Now, that's not a technical rhetorical device, but it is something that is used on a regular basis in debates. It's shifting the blame of what you're guilty of to someone else. It's a brilliant technique that the Republicans do on a regular basis. And while it's fun to analyze it, I'm actually analyzing it for the purposes of us fighting back against it, right? We have to know what they're doing. And really, honestly, it doesn't matter whether or not they're smart enough to know what they're doing. It's the fact that they are doing it and having such a huge effect and being so successful with it. I mean, Alex Jones has the perfect gig where he can pretend to be ignorant. He can pretend to be dumb. And there he draws in people who hate, and they have a level of disdain for elitism. And then they have the same thing like the Republican Party. They put up this facade as though they're anti-intellectuals. And so they have a lot of people who have a grudge against intellectuals, right? And they are drawn to this anti-intellectualism. You don't have to be a smart person to be able to use that device, that technique. But I think that they're doing it intentionally, right? They know what they're doing. Let me be clear. Of course, they're doing it intentionally, but I think that they're fully aware of what they're doing. That's how they have mastered it and honed that craft over so many years. And Democrats and progressives are all kind of stultified. They're like, they don't really, they can never get their footing and their grounding because they're constantly blindsided by how patently obvious what Republicans and people like conspiracy theorists like Alex Jones, it's patently obvious to most people, but it's so effective because they wrap it in an anti-intellectual or anti-elite package. And they come off as the average, ordinary Joe, when in actuality, they are running a massive propaganda campaign against the American people. And when that campaign can't be successful from the higher levels of the Republican Party, like Marco Rubio and Dana Loesch at the NRA meeting, at the NRA town hall with CNN last week, well, then they outsource it to the other apparatchiks on their team, like Alex Jones, and allow him to do his work. And just a moment ago, I said that this was a massive campaign against the American people, but I want to be specific, very specific. This is a massive propaganda campaign against those students who are fighting like hell against the NRA and the influence that the NRA has on the American the entire discourse around guns. This is a massive campaign that has taken everyone from the NRA. I mean, these kids, no wonder their families have started getting death threats, because that's where we are. And if you're not aware of that, yeah, the family of the survivors, and even some of the people who lost their lives, they're getting death threats. And the reason they're getting death threats is because what they have accomplished in such a short amount of time is an anathema to conservatives. These kids have taken on the NRA, and there's almost nothing that the NRA and the Republican Party can do. What are they going to do? Just outright attack these kids? They've tried everything. They tried a town hall. They tried their standard Republican politician, not even just Republican, but they tried the standard politician approach of trying to identify with you without ever answering the question. And then they got booed. Then they tried hardball with Dana Loesch and tried to bring out the big nasty guns, the big, I hate teenagers gun. And that failed. Then they brought out the conspiracy theory guns with Alex Jones. And now Alex Jones is on his tail having to backtrack because he's getting ready to lose his Facebook channel or his YouTube channel. And so now they're down to nothing else but, well, actually, they are now calling David Hogg a bully. So now they're calling him a bully, and they're using, they're getting desperate enough for people to actually be calling in death threats. There's so many things that we will talk about the privilege that these kids exist in. I keep mentioning it, but I'm not going to talk about it right now, because to me, it's so much more important that these kids use their privilege exactly the way that they're using it to change things for the better for every single person in this country. I don't care how rich these kids are. I don't care what privileges they have. They are using that privilege to change the world for the better. So March 24th is the big March for Our Lives. They'll be marching in Washington, D.C. They'll be marching all over the country. 100%. They'll be marching here in Atlanta, but we are 100% behind these kids. They have taken on every institution. They even have, they have Alex Jones on Twitter begging for his YouTube life. Wow. Can we just pause for a minute and realize how fascinating and how amazing this is? The tragedy, obviously, is that they have to go through this at all, and that 17 of their friends died, and their teachers, several teachers and then mostly students died. That is a tragedy. But man, if ever you saw something amazing be born out of a tragedy, it's exactly what these kids, no matter how privileged they are. I see it. I know it. You know it. We all know it. I don't care, though. Not today. It's so much more. Yes, I said this 30 seconds ago. I'm going to repeat it. It's far more important that we support them as they use their privilege to change the world and loosen the stranglehold that the NRA has on this country. Nothing but love for these kids. Alex Wind, Emma Gonzalez, Cameron Katsky, David Hogg, and all the rest of them that I don't even know their names. Keep doing what you guys are doing, and we're most certainly going to keep supporting you. Hey, that's all the time I have for you today. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. Patrons, thanks so much. Tomorrow's the first of the month. You are the real MVPs. If you enjoy this show, you should thank a patron. Find one of our patrons on Twitter and thank a patron. But perhaps I think what they would like more than anything else is for you to join their ranks as patrons. Go to www.patreon.com/the BPD show and become a patron. And patrons, you will be the ones who actually get the scoop. Before we talk to anybody else, you'll be the ones who get to know what happened at Content News. A lot of people want to know what happened with Content News. Well, I'm going to tell patrons. Haven't decided when I'm going to tell you guys. Probably next week, maybe the week after that. I'm going to take a little break, a little vacation, recalibrate, and make my next move. But in the meantime, become a supporter of the Benjamin Dixon Show. www.patreon.com/the BPD show. I'm out of time. See you tomorrow.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.